I'm Amelia, I'm 32 years old, and I just discovered that my mother's meticulously planned, quiet, kid-free Christmas was a carefully constructed lie designed to exclude only one child. My 5-year-old son, Sam. The betrayal didn't just sting. It felt like a surgical removal of a part of my heart I didn't know was still vulnerable. To understand the depth of this wound, you have to understand my family's unique architecture. My mother, Alina, is the matriarch, a woman who values appearances and control above all else. My father, David, is a kind, gentle soul whose primary function in the family unit is to absorb tension and smooth over my mother's sharp edges. And then there's my younger sister, Clara. At 28, she is, and always has been, the golden child. She's the sun around which my parents' world orbits, while I have always felt like a distant, functional planet, noted for my reliability but never for my warmth. The most glaring difference between us has always been how my parents approached our life choices. I am an architect. I build things that are solid, permanent, and functional. When I graduated with my degree, my mother's reaction was a thin, polite smile. "Well, Amelia," she'd said, patting my hand, "that's a practical choice. You'll always have a job." It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal, as if I'd chosen to become a plumber instead of an artist. 2 years later, when Clara finished her degree with a minor in art history, my parents threw a lavish dinner party. My father gave a tearful toast about how proud they were of her for pursuing her passion, and for being so cultured and in touch with beauty. No one seemed to care that her passion left her working part-time in a coffee shop, a job my parents happily subsidized. This pattern of disparity bled into every aspect of our lives, especially finances. When I was 25 and trying to scrape together a deposit for my first apartment, I asked if they could lend me a small amount to get me over the line. My father looked apologetic, but my mother was firm. "Amelia, it will build character for you to save for it yourself," she explained, as if I were a teenager asking for an allowance. "You have to learn to budget." I bit my tongue, worked a second job on weekends, and saved every penny. I built my own character, just as she'd suggested. A few years after that, Clara announced she wanted to find herself by backpacking through Europe for 3 months. Without her even asking, my parents paid for the entire trip. When I'd raised an eyebrow at my dad, he just shrugged sheepishly. "Your mother feels it's an important life experience for her," he'd mumbled, avoiding my gaze. But the most painful manifestation of this favoritism began the day my son, Sam, was born. Sam is everything a 5-year-old boy should be: energetic, curious, loud, and full of a joy that can barely be contained by his small body. To me, his energy is the light of my life. To my mother, he is a handful. From his first family gathering as a toddler, Alina's comments began. "My goodness, does he ever sit still?" she'd ask with a sigh, as Sam toddled happily around the living room. At holidays, while my nephew and niece from my cousin's side might be running amok, my mother's gaze would always find Sam. "Sam, darling, indoor voice," she'd say, even if he was speaking at the same volume as everyone else. Meanwhile, Clara's badly behaved terrier mix, whom she insisted on bringing to every event, could be yapping incessantly at everyone's ankles or trying to steal food from the table, and my mother would just coo, "Oh, look at his big personality. He's just so spirited, isn't he, Clara?" The double standard was so blatant it was almost comical. Sam's childish exuberance was a problem to be managed. The dog's neurotic barking was a personality trait to be admired. This brings me to the phone call 2 weeks before Christmas. It was a Tuesday evening. I was on the floor with Sam, building a ridiculously complex tower of blocks. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, displaying my mother's name. "Hi, Mom," I answered, trying to balance a tricky block with one hand. "Amelia, darling, I'm glad I caught you," she began, her voice smooth and unnaturally sweet. "I'm just finalizing the plans for Christmas Day, and your father and I have been talking." I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tight in my stomach. Her preambles were always a sign of a difficult request. "We've decided we want a truly calm and quiet Christmas this year," she continued. "Just a chance for the adults to relax and connect without any disruptions. So, "We're keeping it kid-free." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Kid-free. The block tower wobbled and crashed to the floor. Sam giggled, unfazed, but the sound barely registered. I sank back onto my heels, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. There were other children in the family. My cousin Mark's 2 stepchildren, a boy of 7 and a girl of 9. "Oh," I said, my voice small. "What about Mark's kids?" There was a brief pause. "Mark and his wife are spending the day with her family this year," she said, a little too quickly. It sounded rehearsed. "So, it works out perfectly. It will just be us, a lovely, peaceful adult gathering. You understand, don't you?" I looked at Sam, who was now trying to put a block on my head. His face was pure innocence. He loved his grandparents. He loved his Aunt Clara. He'd been talking for weeks about showing them the new dinosaur puzzle he'd gotten for his birthday. My heart broke. But what could I do? I was a 32-year-old woman. I couldn't throw a tantrum. I couldn't beg for an invitation. For years, I had been conditioned to accept these little cuts and slights as the price of admission to my own family. So, I did what I always did. I swallowed my hurt and put on a mask of mature understanding. "Of course, Mom, I understand," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Sam and I will have our own quiet Christmas here." "Wonderful," she chirped, the relief in her voice palpable. "I knew you'd be reasonable. Oh, and Amelia, don't forget about the joint gift for me and your father. David wanted me to remind everyone to send their share to Clara, since she's organizing it." I almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. I was being uninvited from the celebration, but was still expected to contribute to the main event. The gift was a big one, a 10-day, all-inclusive cruise, an idea my father had proposed in a group chat as a way to bring the family together and celebrate my parents' upcoming anniversary. My share was $1,200, a significant expense for me as a single mother. But I'd agreed without hesitation, hoping, as I always did, that such a grand gesture might finally buy me a seat at the main table. "Right, the cruise," I said numbly. "I'll send it to Clara this week." "You're a dear, we'll talk soon," she said, and then she hung up. I put the phone down and stared at the wall. Sam tugged on my sleeve, offering me a red block. I forced a smile for him, my mind racing. A calm, kid-free Christmas. It felt wrong, but I had no proof, just a lifetime of instincts screaming that I was being lied to. I pushed the feeling down. I would respect her wishes. I would be the good, reasonable daughter. I would pay my share for the cruise, and I would spend Christmas Day alone with my son. The week leading up to Christmas was a strange mix of forced cheerfulness and profound loneliness. I threw myself into creating the perfect Christmas for Sam. We baked gingerbread cookies in the shape of dinosaurs, spilling flour all over the kitchen floor. We watched every holiday movie I could find, cuddled under a thick blanket on the sofa. We decorated our small apartment until it looked like a tinsel factory had exploded inside it. I was determined to make the day so full of joy and magic for him that he wouldn't even notice the cavernous absence of his extended family. On Christmas Eve, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with his big, earnest eyes. "Is Grandma Aliner coming tomorrow?" he asked. The question felt like a physical blow. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead, my smile feeling brittle. "Not tomorrow, sweetie. Grandma and Grandpa are having a quiet day for the grown-ups, but we'll see them soon, I promise." He seemed to accept this, his trust in me absolute. He hugged his stuffed triceratops tighter and drifted off to sleep, leaving me alone in the quiet of the apartment, the twinkling Christmas lights reflecting off the silent surfaces. I felt a familiar pang, the ache of being on the outside looking in. I had transferred the $1,200 to Clara's account 2 days earlier. She had replied with a single, breezy text. "Got it, THX." No questions about why I wouldn't be there. No words of sympathy, just a transactional acknowledgement. It was clear the family had discussed it, and the decision was final. I was out. Christmas morning arrived with a flurry of excitement from Sam that was infectious enough to temporarily chase away my melancholy. He tore into his presence with gusto, his gasps of delight echoing in our small living room. I had gotten him a massive Lego set of a space shuttle, and his face when he saw the box was a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness. For a few hours, it worked. I was just a mom watching her son have the best day ever. We were a complete unit, a tiny, happy island. We spent the morning building the shuttle, our fingers fumbling with the tiny pieces. For lunch, I made his favorite, macaroni and cheese shaped like reindeer. As he ate, I scrolled through my phone, a nervous habit I couldn't shake. I saw photos from friends, their living rooms filled with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Each picture was a small reminder of what we were missing. I quickly put my phone away, scolding myself for indulging in self-pity. In the afternoon, to get us out of the apartment, I took Sam to a nearby park. It was mostly empty, a cold wind rustling the bare branches of the trees. Sam didn't mind. He ran towards the swings, shouting for me to push him higher and higher. As he flew towards the gray sky, his laughter ringing out in the crisp air, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness so fierce it almost brought me to tears. He was my whole world. Why wasn't he good enough for them? Was his joyous noise really so offensive? Was his presence so disruptive that it was worth banishing both of us for? The questions swirled in my head, a bitter counterpoint to my son's happy shouts. I knew the official reason was a lie. My cousin Mark and his family never went to his wife's parents on Christmas Day. Her family lived in another state. But what could I do with that suspicion? Confronting my mother without concrete proof would only lead to a torrent of gaslighting and accusations of me being overly sensitive and paranoid. It was her word against my feelings, and in my family, feelings were not evidence. We returned home as dusk began to fall, both of us rosy-cheeked from the cold. I made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and we settled in to assemble the final stages of the Lego shuttle. The day had been quiet, yes, but it hadn't been lonely. It had been peaceful. For the first time, I considered the possibility that maybe this was better. Maybe a holiday without the subtle jabs, the passive-aggressive sighs, and the constant, draining effort of trying to win my mother's approval was a blessing in disguise. By 8 p.m., Sam was exhausted and fast asleep, dreaming of astronauts and galaxies. I cleaned up the wrapping paper, put the last of the dishes away, and finally sat down on the sofa with a glass of wine. The silence of the apartment was absolute. I picked up my phone, intending to mindlessly scroll until I felt tired enough to sleep. And that's when I saw it. A new post from Clara, uploaded just 30 minutes ago. It wasn't a photo. It was a video. The caption was bubbly and thoughtless. The best family Christmas, so much love and chaos, lol. My thumb hovered over the play button, a sense of dread washing over me. I pressed it. The video flickered to life, and the first thing I heard was a burst of familiar laughter. It was my father's deep, rumbling laugh, the one he saved for moments of genuine delight. The camera, clearly held by Clara, panned across my parents' living room. It was exactly as I remembered it from Christmases past. The towering tree sparkling in the corner, the fireplace roaring, the festive clutter of discarded wrapping paper and gift bags. And people, so many people. The camera swung to the left and my breath caught in my throat. There, sitting on the floor amidst a pile of presents, were my cousin Mark and his wife, and with them, his 2 stepchildren. The 9-year-old girl was holding up a new doll, beaming, while her 7-year-old brother was engrossed in a new video game. So much for them being with her family out of state. My mother's lie was so casual, so effortless. A cold numbness started in my fingertips and spread through my body. The camera continued its sweep. It passed by my Aunt Carol, who was laughing at something my uncle said, and then it settled on a small cluster of people near the sofa. My sister Clara was there, her face bright with glee, and sitting next to her, playing with a brand new toy truck, was a small boy with blonde hair I'd never seen before. Clara's voice came from behind the camera, narrating. And look, even little Tommy made it. My roommate's son is the cutest. The roommate's son, a toddler, a child who was not family, a complete stranger to my parents, was welcome at the KidFree Christmas. The numbness was now a chilling, all-consuming frost. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a painful thud in the deafening silence of my apartment. And then, as if to add the most surreal and insulting layer to the betrayal, the camera panned down. Tucked into a new plush dog bed by the hearth, wearing a ridiculous reindeer antler headband, was Clara's yapping terrier. The dog was gnawing on what looked like a brand new chew toy, a little pile of dog-friendly treats next to him. Even the dog was there. The dog, whose spirited personality was celebrated while my son's was condemned, had a place by the fire. My son, their grandson, was banished. But my cousin's stepkids, my sister's roommate's son, and my sister's dog were all welcome. The message was not subtle. It was a broadcast, a declaration written in neon lights. It wasn't about kids. It was never about a calm or quiet day. It was about my kid. It was about me. We were the problem. We were the disruption. We were the only ones not wanted. I felt a wave of nausea. The wine in my glass suddenly seemed repulsive. I put it down, my hand trembling so hard that the glass clinked against the coffee table. I replayed the video. And then again, I was searching for some other explanation, some detail that would make it all make sense. But there was none. The evidence was irrefutable, a cheerful, 2-minute home movie of my own ostracization. I thought of my son, sleeping peacefully in his room, completely unaware of this casual, brutal rejection. I thought of the gentle way I had explained to him that Grandma and Grandpa needed a quiet day, the lie I had told him to protect their image, to protect his feelings. I had defended them. I had made excuses for them. I had played the part of the good, understanding daughter while they were hosting a party from which only I was barred. The hurt was so immense it felt physical, like a pressure building in my chest, making it hard to breathe. The years of little slights, of feeling second best, of being the practical one, the responsible one, the one who had to build her own character, it all coalesced into this one moment. This wasn't a small cut. This was a deep, deliberate severing. My mother hadn't just excluded me from a holiday. She had drawn a line in the sand, placing me and my child firmly on the other side. And the rest of the family, by their smiling presence in that video, had silently agreed to it. The video wasn't over. Clara's voice, bubbly and oblivious, piped up again. Okay, everyone, time for the big finale, the gift for Mom and Dad. The camera zoomed in on my father and mother, who were sitting side by side on the sofa, looking expectant and happy. My sister stepped into the frame, holding a large, beautifully wrapped rectangular object. Okay, on the count of 3, Clara announced, her voice filled with manufactured suspense. 1, 2, 3. My parents tore away the wrapping paper with synchronized glee. Underneath was a large, elegant dark wood frame. Inside the frame, against a backdrop of velvet, was a pristine, cream-colored certificate. The camera zoomed in so close I could read the embossed gold lettering. Congratulations, Alina and David. It read, you are cordially invited to a 10-day, all-inclusive Caribbean cruise. Below the grand title were the details, the name of the luxury cruise line, the dates of travel, the list of exotic ports of call. It was the gift, the big, family-uniting gesture that my father had been so excited about, the gift I had paid $1,200 towards. The video captured my mother's reaction perfectly. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears of joy. My father wrapped an arm around her, beaming, his face a mask of pure happiness. Oh, children, my mother sobbed theatrically. You shouldn't have, it's too much. You deserve it, Mom, Clara's voice called out. My cousin Mark added, Happy anniversary, Alina. A chorus of happy congratulations filled the room. My parents, the people who had looked me in the eye, or at least over the phone, and told me that my son and I were not welcome, were now tearfully accepting a lavish vacation that I had helped pay for. They were celebrating their family, a family that, just hours before, they had actively edited to remove its least desirable members. The video ended there, with a final shot of my mother hugging the framed certificate to her chest as if it were a holy relic. The screen went black, but the image was burned into my mind. The frost that had been creeping through me instantly evaporated, replaced by a white-hot rage. The hurt was still there, but it had been transformed, superheated into something sharp and powerful. It was the kind of anger that clarifies everything, burning away years of confusion, self-doubt, and the desperate need for approval. In that moment, I saw the entire dynamic with perfect, brutal clarity. I wasn't the difficult daughter. My son wasn't the problem child. We were scapegoats. I was the responsible one, so my compliance could be counted on. I was the one who wouldn't make a scene, so I could be pushed aside without consequence. They had counted on my silence. They had counted on my pain being private. They had counted on me to absorb this, just like I had absorbed every other slight and come back for more. But seeing that framed certificate, knowing my money was in it, changed the equation. This wasn't just an emotional wound anymore. They had taken my money. They had used my hard-earned money to fund a celebration of the very family unit from which they had just ejected me. It was no longer just an insult. It was a transaction, and I wanted a refund. My hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped. I picked up my phone, my movements precise and deliberate. I went back to the video, paused it on the perfect, clear shot of my mother clutching the framed cruise certificate, and took a screenshot. The image was sharp, undeniable. I opened my messaging app and selected my father's contact. He was the softer target. He was the one with a conscience, however buried it might be under years of enabling my mother's behavior. I attached the screenshot to the message. For a moment, I contemplated writing a long, scathing paragraph detailing my pain and their hypocrisy, but I deleted it. They didn't deserve my words. They didn't deserve my emotion. They deserved the same cold, transactional treatment they had given me. My thumbs typed out a short, simple, and utterly final message. Returning to sender. Please send my $1,200 back. I stared at the words for a second. They felt right. They felt powerful. There was no room for negotiation, no opening for excuses. It was a demand. I pressed send. The little blue bubble appeared on the screen, followed by the word delivered. It was done. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I sent the text, a strange calm descended upon me. The rage was still there, a hot coal glowing in my chest, but it was now contained, controlled. It was fuel. I placed my phone face down on the coffee table and walked to my son's room. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open gently. Sam was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. One arm was flung over his head, the other still wrapped around his stuffed triceratops. His face was so peaceful, so completely untouched by the ugly drama I was wrestling with. In the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight, he looked perfect. He was perfect. He was not a handful or a disruption. He was a little boy, and he deserved a family that would cherish him, not exclude him. Looking at him, any lingering shred of doubt I might have had about my decision vanished. This wasn't just for me. It was for him. I would not allow him to grow up in a family where he was made to feel like he was second best, an inconvenience, a problem to be tolerated. I would not teach him that love was conditional or that he had to shrink himself to be acceptable to others. My mother had drawn the line, and for my son's sake, I was going to hold it. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone. The screen lit up with a string of notifications. A text from Clara. A moment later, another one. What was that text to Dad about? Then, a message from my mother. Amelia, what is the meaning of this? Call me immediately. I ignored them all. I imagined the scene in my parents' living room, my father's phone buzzing, the confused look on his face as he read my message. The way he would have shown it to my mother, his expression a mixture of panic and guilt. The happy, festive atmosphere would have evaporated, replaced by a tense, ugly silence. Good. Let them sit in the discomfort they had created. My phone started ringing. It was my father. I watched the screen, his picture flashing, and pressed the silence button. He called again. I silenced it again. Then my mother tried. I did the same. A flurry of texts followed. From Dad, Amelia, please pick up. We need to talk about this. From Mom, this is an incredibly hurtful and dramatic thing to do on Christmas Day. You are ruining everything. From Clara, OMG, Mom is freaking out. What did you do? Ruining everything? The audacity was breathtaking. They had lied to me, excluded my child, and celebrated with strangers, but I was the one ruining the day by refusing to be a silent victim. I turned my phone completely off. I would not be drawn into a screaming match over the phone. If they wanted to talk, they would have to do it on my terms, on my turf. The next 2 hours passed in a state of suspended animation. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving me feeling hollowed out but resolute. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands steady as I poured the hot water. I sat on my sofa in the quiet of my apartment and I waited. I knew he would come. My father couldn't stand unresolved conflict. He would have to try to fix it, to smooth it over, to put the lid back on the box I had just blown open. The minutes ticked by. 60, 90. Then, at almost 11 p.m., I heard it. Hasty, heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs to my third-floor apartment, followed by a frantic, loud knocking on my door. It wasn't a polite Christmas evening knock. It was a panicked summons. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. It was my father, just as I'd expected. He was alone. His face was flushed, his hair was a mess, and he was breathing heavily, his shoulders heaving. He looked desperate. I unlocked the deadbolt, the click echoing loudly in the hallway. I turned the knob and pulled the door open, not wide, but just enough to face him. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance, my arms crossed over my chest. I said nothing. I just waited. "Amelia," he panted, trying to catch his breath. He put a hand on the doorframe to steady himself. "Thank God. We need to talk. Can I come in?" "There's nothing to talk about, Dad," I said, my voice as cold and hard as I could make it. My text was perfectly clear. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just let me explain. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was a last-minute thing. Mark's plans changed, and Clara's roommate had a childcare emergency. Your mother, she just didn't want to make a fuss and bother you about it." The excuses were so weak, so transparently false, they were insulting. He was reading from a script they had hastily concocted in the car on the way over. He was treating me like an idiot. The hot coal of anger in my chest flared brightly. I stared at my father, at this man whose weakness I had pitied and excused for my entire life. I saw the desperate pleading in his eyes, the desire for this all to just go away so he could return to his comfortable, quiet life. And I felt nothing but a cold, hard resolve. "Bother me?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You think you would have been bothering me by telling me that the KidFree rule had been inexplicably lifted for every child in the world, except for your own grandson." He flinched. "It wasn't like that, Amelia. It was complicated." "No, it was simple," I shot back, my voice rising. "Mom didn't want Sam there. That's the truth, isn't it? She's never liked that he's an energetic little boy. She's always preferred Clara's yapping dog to my son. And you've stood by and let her do it for years. You've enabled it. Every sigh, every passive-aggressive comment, every time you celebrated Clara for doing nothing while I worked for everything I have. You stood there and you let it happen." Tears welled in his eyes. "That's not fair." "Not fair?" I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You want to talk about what's not fair? Let's talk about it. Is it fair that you told me to build character when I needed help, but you paid for Clara's 3-month vacation? Is it fair that my architecture degree was practical, but her art history minor was passionate? Is it fair that tonight, on Christmas, my son is sleeping in his bed, believing his grandparents just wanted a quiet day, while you were hosting my cousin's kids and a complete stranger's toddler? Tell me, Dad, which part of that is fair?" He had no answer. He just stood there, looking defeated, his chest still heaving from the climb up the stairs. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence was his confession. "I came over to fix this," he finally whispered. "Your mother is hysterical. She thinks you hate her." "For the first time in my life, she might be right about something," I said, the words tasting like freedom. "And you didn't come here to fix this for me. You came here to fix it for her. You came because things are uncomfortable now. You came because I'm not playing my part anymore. I'm not being the good, quiet, understanding daughter who just takes it. I was almost shouting now, the years of repressed frustration pouring out of me in a torrent. My whole body was trembling, not with fear or weakness, but with a furious, liberating strength. She wanted a calm Christmas, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. She got one. My day was incredibly calm. It was also humiliating and heartbreaking, but she got what she wanted from me, and in return, she accepted a gift. A huge, expensive gift that I helped pay for with money I worked hard to earn. A gift to celebrate the family, to bring the family together. I was fully yelling now, the sound echoing in the sterile hallway. I didn't care if my neighbors heard. I wanted the world to hear. "A cruise is for family, Dad," I shouted, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. "And since MY's son and I are clearly not considered family, you can have MY share as a gift. It's the last one you'll ever get from me." The finality of the words hung in the air between us. His face crumpled. The last vestiges of his manufactured defense crumbled away, leaving behind the raw, ugly truth of the situation. He knew I was right. He knew every word was true. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart pounding. I had said it. I had said the unsayable. I had finally, after 32 years, stood up to them. My father simply stared at me, his eyes filled with a grief that I knew was not just for the ruined holiday, but for the shattering of our family as he knew it. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands trembled as he opened his banking app. He didn't say a word. He just typed for a moment. A few seconds later, my own phone, which I had turned back on before he arrived, buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my bank. Interac e-transfer received $1,200. He looked up at me, his face ashen. "There," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's done." "Good," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Now please go." He looked like he wanted to say more, to offer one last, pathetic plea. But he saw the look in my eyes, the cold, unyielding finality, and he knew it was useless. He just nodded, turned around, and walked slowly back down the stairs, each footstep sounding out like a nail being hammered into a coffin. I watched him go until he was out of sight. Then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt home, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. It was over. In the silence that followed my father's departure, I didn't feel triumph, not at first. I felt a profound and unsettling emptiness. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind the hollowed-out space where my illusions about my family used to be. I walked back to the living room and sank onto the sofa, the bank notifications still glowing on my phone screen. The $1,200 felt like severance pay. My phone buzzed again, an angry, rambling text from Clara, calling me selfish and dramatic. Another one from my mother, a long, self-pitying paragraph about how she had tried her best and how I had never appreciated her. I read the first few words of each message, and then, without hesitation, I blocked both of their numbers. Then I blocked my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin Mark. It wasn't born of spite, but of a sudden, desperate need for peace. I was building a wall, and for the first time, it was for my own protection. I slept fitfully that night, but when I woke in the morning, the emptiness had begun to fill with something new, a quiet, steady sense of peace. Sam woke up, cheerful and oblivious, and asked if we could finish building his Lego shuttle. As we sat on the floor, surrounded by tiny plastic pieces, I watched him, truly watched him. I saw his intense focus, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. I heard his happy chatter as he explained the function of each part of the rocket. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I had done the right thing. The bomb I had dropped on my family had been a controlled demolition. I had not destroyed my life, I had cleared the site. I had removed a toxic, unstable structure to make room for something new, something healthier and stronger. The days that followed were quiet. The silence from my family was absolute. It was strange, at first, not to have that background hum of expectation and low-grade anxiety. But soon, the strangeness was replaced by relief. The pressure was gone. I no longer had to perform, to pretend, to contort myself into a shape that was more acceptable to them. I could just be Amelia, a mother, an architect, a person. I used the $1,200 as a fresh start. I booked a weekend trip for Sam and me to a science center in a nearby city that had a massive space exhibit. When I told him, his eyes lit up in a way that was more brilliant than any string of Christmas lights. That, I realized, was what family celebrations were supposed to feel like. Not obligation and anxiety, but pure, shared joy. We went on our trip 2 weeks later. We spent a whole day exploring the exhibit, marveling at models of planets and sitting in a mock-up of a spaceship cockpit. Watching Sam's face, filled with wonder and awe, I felt a happiness so clean and uncomplicated that it almost made me cry. This was real. This was ours. We didn't need a crowded living room or a pile of expensive gifts approved by a committee. We just needed each other. The rift with my parents and sister remains. My father has tried to reach out once, through an email, with a subject line that simply said, "I'm sorry." I read it and I believe he is. But I also know that his sorrow cannot fix my mother's nature, nor can it undo years of ingrained family dynamics. Forgiveness might be possible someday, but trust, once shattered so completely, is a much harder thing to rebuild. I replied to his email with a single sentence. "I appreciate that, Dad. I hope you are well." It was not an invitation, but a polite closing of a door. I am building new traditions for Sam and me. Our holidays will be small, but they will be honest. They will be filled with dinosaur-shaped cookies, Legos, and trips to places that spark his curiosity. They will be free of passive aggression, judgment, and the heavy weight of unspoken rules. Our family will not be defined by who is excluded, but by the love and acceptance that exists within our own four walls. I look back at that Christmas video not with anger anymore, but with a strange sense of gratitude. It was a painful gift, but a gift nonetheless. It showed me the truth I had been unwilling to see for myself. They wanted a calm, kid-free Christmas, and in the end, that's what I am going to have for the rest of my life, a life free of their particular brand of childish drama. My son and I are the family, we are the celebration, and we are enough. So, Reddit, am I the jerk for blowing up my family's Christmas after they lied to exclude my son? After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories. Ing soon.